Hi everyone, it's Amanda. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some books that I've read recently. I have about 6 or 7 to talk to you about today. This isn't including the dark romance books that I've been reading for the dark romance readathon. That will be in my next recent reads. But today I have some books to share with you. One of them is in my top 5 of 2022 and it's YA. Like, who is she? But also it makes sense because it has romance in it. But it's so good. So I just can't wait to share. Yeah, let's just get into it. But before we do, be sure to like, subscribe down below if you love romance books like me. I'd love to have you here. Let's just get into one of my favorite books of the year. It is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. Let me grab you the cover just in case you wanted to see not the naked cover. It's also stunning. I didn't take the sticker off yet, but the underside of the first edition is too good. But this, why am I out of breath? I just started the video and I'm already out of breath. Okay, we need to breathe. So this book is a gothic romance fantasy and it is so good, okay? I rated it 5 stars, obviously. I hadn't read this author before. I think she wrote a book called like All the Stars and Teeth, which I own and I really need to read it at this point. Like, the writing style in this, I loved everything about this. The romance, it wasn't steamy because it's YA, you know, like you can't put extremely explicit scenes, but let me tell you, I was sweating. I was most definitely sweating. I was turning red and there wasn't even that much going on, but it was just so spicy because the tension. It reminded me a lot of how I felt when I was reading The Cruel Prince. I love that series. If you didn't know, it's like my favorite YA series of all time. I think that the romance is done so well, even though it's not like super prevalent. It's not like they're having sex all the time. Like, that's what I'm trying to say. But it just, you feel it, you know? And that's what this book did. Let me explain. We follow Signa. She had cheated death as a child when her whole family was poisoned. So her mother dies, everything like that. She has also a fortune. That's important to the story. She's wealthy and people want to use her for her money. So she's been in and out of these homes that will take her in because they want to use her. But everyone that she ever lives with dies and death keeps following her around everywhere she goes. Death is personified in this book, so she's just annoyed that he's always constantly in her life. She's like, why can't you leave everybody in my life alone? I'm sick of death following me everywhere, and everywhere she goes she is now followed by death. And that makes people believe that there's this conspiracy around her that she brings upon death. And so of course in the beginning her aunt does die, and it's actually a good thing because she was really bad and horrible to her. But that's where the story begins. She ends up having one last remaining family member to go live with, except this family is super complicated because her Aunt Lilith had just died and her daughter is also sick. So there's some complications going on in the family. There's secrets to be unveiled. And when she goes to live there, she kind of wants to have this life that she thinks she's been missing out on. She wants to debut. She wants to maybe find a husband. She just wants to live a normal life, gossip, have tea, whatever. And there's just a lot of intricacies to the story. There's a mystery plot because you do end up seeing that maybe there was an ulterior motive to Lilith's death. And so Signa really wants to figure out what's going on. And you as the reader also want to figure out what's going on. We have a sarcastic sidekick character. We have Death himself. The atmosphere was amazing. The whole mansion and horses and the garden and just everything about this, it was immaculate. I was gasping for breath. These twists, the whole mystery plot, there wasn't just one twist. It kept hitting me. Ryan was just confused. I was on the couch. He's playing Call of Duty. I'm like, oh, what is happening? And then you'd flip the page and then another page reveal would happen and I'd be like maybe I was just having too good of a time and other people probably predicted this, but I found it to be so good. And the last twist, if you've read this, the last twist, I was actually shook. I was shook, but the thing about this is it's there, you know, like it's there throughout the story. Everything could have been predicted, but I'm just a dumb bitch. Next up, I had another 5-star. This one is Desecrated Saints by J. Rose. This is the 3rd book in the Blackwood Institute series. And if you know me, you know that I was waiting for this to drop. I Loved it. It was so good. Dare I say the best in the series, but I say that every single time. So you can't really hold me to that. My opinion on my favorite series, I feel like every time a book comes out, I'm like, yes, this is the one. This is the one that's the best. But I really like the inclusion of a new character in the harem. If you haven't heard me talk about this series, I will tell you real quick. It follows a girl, Brooklyn. She's in a mental institution in the beginning of the first book. She gets sent to Blackwood Institute, which is a correctional facility that supposedly fixes people and sends them back into civilization after 3 years, I think it is. But they never come out. And also, if they did come out, they'd never be the same. And it's a reverse harem with 4 guys. At first, there's 5 guys in the last book. And it just follows the mystery of the institution, and it gets really messed up as you go on. I can't say much more. I just really liked the suspense and mystery to it. I always compare it to American Horror Story Asylum, but this 3rd book was another 5-star, which means that this is a favorite series of all time for me. I rated all of them 5 stars. I think it was an amazing story. It all made sense. I think all the books were really, really strong in their plots. And this last one was very explosive. Like, we find out a lot about Brooklyn and her past, and then there's just a lot of action scenes in this one, and I thought the ending was so beautiful and touching. I was on the edge of my seat. So definitely recommend this series if you haven't picked it up already. Next up, I read That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. This one was just a really fun monster romance fantasy. And I don't remember a whole lot about the plot, but I know that I liked it and I rated it 3.5 stars, I believe. We follow Cinnamon, she's our main character, and she ends up stumbling across a demon and it chases her and stuff, and then he ends up actually convincing her to help him destroy this goddess who they've all been wrongly worshiping because she's actually this horrible witch that took away the powers of the demons. So they end up on this adventure to destroy the goddess because she's evil, and then there's a lot of action, there's a decent amount of steam. It was just a fun time. It had a lot of quirkier humor, so if you're not into that, definitely stay away. At times it was a little bit cringy, but if you know that going into it, I think that it'll be a fun read, and it was kind of funny sometimes. Next we have Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. I rated this one 4 stars. I really liked it. There were some flaws in the book for me, like I didn't like it as much as the cat and mouse duet, but I did really like the steam. Okay, H.D. Carlton does not miss on the smut in her books, and this book was no exception. It was hot. It had a mystery / creepy plot to it as well. We follow Sawyer and Enzo. Sawyer is a runaway. She's been running away from her past. She's been collecting different identities as she keeps moving around because she's running from something. And in this book, she stumbles across Enzo and takes his identity, and then things don't go as well as they usually do for her. He finds her again and takes her on this boat and ends up in this precarious situation with sharks and smut, and ooh, you gotta read it for yourself. Honestly, it was a good time. But unfortunately, while they're on this boat, there's a storm and they end up getting isolated at this lighthouse where this old man is staying, and he's a little creepy, he's a little weird, but he lets them stay with him, but they keep hearing weird noises in the middle of the night. And then there's just a lot going on that's kind of creepy. They want to get out, and he says he doesn't have any access to anything, and it's just really weird. They keep finding out things about him, and they don't know. They're not sure. And then they're bantering back and forth because they hate each other. So all in all, it was good, but I do think there were a lot of flaws in it. It didn't feel like the stakes were very high, and it was a little bit of a slow pace for a suspense romance like this. I just felt like there wasn't a ton going on. Like when I look back on it, what happened in the middle portion? I know there was a lot of steam, but I feel like that kind of jaded me as I was reading. And then I look back and I'm like, why was it that many pages only for that story? But I did like the romance. I don't think that Enzo was as fully developed as Zaid, and that's the hero in the cat and mouse duet. I just didn't like him as much, maybe. Moving on to the classic literature pick from last month, we read Whispers in the Dark. This was a dark romance. I don't even know what to say. I was really actually liking it until about 70 or 80% in. It started getting really cheesy for a dark romance, and I also just hated the ending. So that's the reason for my 2-star. The beginning was super disturbing and dark, but I do like those type of books, so I was excited to see where it was going because there was hope that this would turn into a revenge plot. So I did really enjoy the middle portion of the book. The beginning was fine. I was just waiting for something to happen, you know, where she takes charge. And I just really liked the middle, but I hated the end. That's why I rated it 2 stars. So all in all, it was just fine. It was disturbing in many ways. There's just stronger dark romances out there that take this sort of thing, kidnapping, captivity, and do it a little bit better with the ending and the cheesiness. So I had to lower my rating for this one. And lastly, I read Blood Scion, which is a fantasy. And the romance plot in this one really was not good. It did not need a romance to be successful. But in this one, we have a really dark fantasy. It just had very dark themes. So this book is inspired by Nigerian mythology. We follow child soldiers. So automatically it is a heavier topic. I think this can be compared to a lot of books that I've read recently, like The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. You could also say Children of Blood and Bone and A Song of Wraith and Ruin, which I love that book. I rated this one 3.5 stars, so I liked it, but there were things I didn't like the romance, and it was a little bit information heavy in some parts. I actually almost DNF'd the book because of events that take place. But then I found myself coming back to it because I was curious about how the story would unfold after that happened. In this one, we follow Sloane. She's a scion, which basically means she has to remain hidden, and she gets drafted. So she ends up having to be a child soldier and go through this horrible thing that they do. Kind of like the Hunger Games meets Divergent. There was a lot of similarities in some of the scenes, but still with a darker twist. So I did enjoy the action in this book. She ends up having to make these decisions that are gut-wrenching, and she ends up having to kill a lot of people. And let's just say some of them are close to her, and you are shook when you're reading the book. I will say this book was violent and brutal. So if you want something darker than your average YA fantasy, I'd give this one a shot. So those are the books that I've read recently. Let me know down below what your last 5-star read was, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.